The main change between that video and today's video is that your COVID-19 PCR test now has to be done within 48 hours of departure for all travelers. All passengers traveling out of the country are required to provide evidence of full COVID-19 vaccination or a negative COVID-19 PCR test done no longer than 48 hours before departure. This is so new to me. This section about guidelines for outbound passengers, that now if you're flying out of the country, you need to either be fully vaccinated, right, or have a COVID-19 test done before 48 hours before your flight, irrespective of what your destination or your transit country requires. That is new, guys. Like, that is super new to me. Is it new to you? Hi, guys. Many of you have been sending me messages asking me to create a new video on the updated travel protocols for traveling to Nigeria, given many of you are coming in during this December New Year period. I have held off on creating this video simply because that I knew that because of this Omicron, this new variant of COVID-19, that there was a huge chance that Nigeria would actually change its travel protocols. Indeed, Nigeria has now updated its travel protocols and put out sort of a guideline on the 2nd of December 2021. It's key to note that these travel protocols aren't going to come into effect until Sunday, the 5th of December 2021. Quick intro, my name is Sassy Funke and I'm a Nigerian travel and lifestyle content creator, really creating to help Nigerian travelers travel better and smarter, provide reliable, trustworthy information. If that is something that's of interest to you and you feel you can find value in, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Hit that red subscribe button down below. I'm trying to get to 70,000 subscribers and you guys can make it happen. Don't also forget to give this video a huge thumbs up. It really encourages me to create more content like this, so give this video a huge thumbs up. Before I get this video started, I wanted to let you know that I'm actually going to be putting chapters and segmenting all the information that I'm sharing in this video, because it's going to be a long video and you can easily navigate to different sections given the timestamps. I will make sure to actually link the document that I'm going to be reading from in the description box below, so you can easily reference that information whenever you want. I know many of you out there may have seen my old video that I shared the travel protocols for traveling to Nigeria, and I want to first start saying that the main change between that video and today's video is that your COVID-19 PCR test now has to be done within 48 hours of departure for all travelers, right? That's actually the main change. But I'm going to dive into everything they've written here. They said the document is titled The COVID-19 Response Provisional Travel Protocol for Travelers Arriving in Nigeria. It's key to know that they said provisional, which means it may change, right? So that's key to bear in mind. But for now, that is what we have. It states here, this protocol is a revision of the travel protocols released on the 22nd of October 2021. It said the summary of the interim travel guidelines for passengers arriving in Nigeria. Number 1, your COVID-19 PCR test needs to be done within 48 hours of departure for all travelers. Regardless of whether you've been vaccinated or unvaccinated or partially vaccinated, you need to do a pre-departure COVID test, a PCR test specifically, within 48 hours of your flight, right? Second, it says the post-arrival day 2 COVID-19 PCR test for all travelers, that all travelers must do a day 2 test in Nigeria. Third, self-isolation for 7 days for partially vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers. And a day 7 post-arrival negative COVID-19 test is required for exit from isolation, right? So essentially, if you've not been fully vaccinated, you need to isolate for 7 days and then do a day 7 test in addition, right? It then states here that what fully vaccinated means, in case you're not aware, is that you need to have at least 2 weeks following 2 completed doses of either AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna vaccine, or a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Partially vaccinated means you've had only one dose of the above, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to go into detail with regard to this protocol. I'm going to try and summarize bits of it because I'm sure some of you might be bored of hearing this over and over. But for those of you that are not bored of it, it will have enough detail for you to actually get the gist. It states here, the guidelines for inbound passengers. It states A, pre-departure from country of exit, pre-boarding. Step 1, travelers must perform a COVID-19 test not more than 2 days, 48 hours before boarding or departure. It says PCR tests done more than 48 hours before departure are not valid, and that person will not be allowed to board. It then goes on to say that rapid antigen or antibody tests are not acceptable. Only PCR tests can be used for this purpose. It states test validity commences from the time of sample collection, right? So actually, the test is valid from the time they actually take the sample from you, not from the time you get the results. Key to note. It states for travelers with multiple connections before arrival in Nigeria, the PCR test must be valid within 48 hours of boarding from the first point of departure. Essentially, if you're traveling from like the US to Nigeria and you're transiting via London, your 48-hour test is from the US, not from London, right? So key to note that. It then goes on to say that the travelers must bring along an electronic or hard copy of their negative COVID-19 PCR test for departure at the airport and upon arrival in Nigeria. I would advise hard copy, but yeah. A record of their vaccination status will also be required on arrival in Nigeria. Key to note this. Step 2, all intending passengers, including diplomats and children less than 10 years old, must register via the online portal. That's the NITP portal. And on there, you have to fill the health declaration, self-reporting form. You have to ensure that you have all your right contact information on that platform. Travelers must provide their phone numbers, residential address, functional email, because they're going to contact you, right? So make sure it's the right information you're putting in there. It also states that travelers must inform port health officials on arrival of any change in their health status since the completion of their health declaration form. Step 3, after filling the online health declaration self-reporting form, it states that the travelers will be directed to upload their negative COVID-19 PCR test on the portal. You actually have to upload your test on the portal. It states that children, only children less than 10 years old, are exempt from uploading a pre-arrival COVID-19 test. So if your child is less than 10 on the day of travel, they don't have to upload a test, but key to note, they have to register nevertheless. Once this is successfully done, travelers will proceed to the payment section of the travel portal, right? Again, only children less than 10 years are exempted from payments for the repeat test in Nigeria. So it's saying here that when you're paying for your test that you have to do in Nigeria, children don't have to pay, right? So it's key to note. It then states that travelers are advised to still bring along an electronic or hard copy of their negative COVID-19 PCR test for presentation at the airport. Take the hard copy. Step 4, for partially vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers. So if you're partially vaccinated or unvaccinated travelers, it states this. On reaching the payment section of the portal, travelers will be requested to select their preferred lab based on where they'll be self-isolating for a period of 7 days in Nigeria. A list of accredited private labs across the country are available on the payment platform. The next stage is for you to now choose a bank payment gateway and then proceed to pay for your day 2 and day 7 test, in-country PCR test. Key to note here, it says day 2 is your arrival day is day 1 and the next day is day 2. This might be a bit confusing because some countries, the arrival day is day 0, but for Nigeria, your arrival day is day 1 and your second day is day 2, right? Similarly for day 7, your arrival day is day 1 and on the 6th day after the arrival day, that's your day 7, right? It then states that please note that travelers paying in Naira should use cards issued by a Nigerian bank. Otherwise, it may not work. Now, information for fully vaccinated travelers. It states on reaching the gateway section of the portal, travelers will be requested to select their preferred lab center based on where they're going to be located 2 days after arrival in the country for their day 2 test. Again, day 1 is the day you arrive and the next day is day 2. A list of accredited private labs across the country are available on the portal again to choose from. The next stage is to choose a payment bank gateway and then proceed to pay for your day 2 in-country COVID-19 PCR test. A record of their vaccination status will also be required on arrival in Nigeria, simply because most likely you will request to see it at the airport, or they may. Step 5, after successful payment, travelers should download the Permit to Travel certificate, aka the QR code, using the Get Permit to Travel button, visible at the top right-hand corner of the portal. Save and print out the form for presentation at the point of boarding. The Permit to Travel, or QR code, will have a paid label if payment is successful, an unpaid label if payment has not gone through yet or is unsuccessful. Any passenger with an unpaid label will not be allowed to travel. This is very important, right? So if you're having issues with regard to payment, make sure you try and resolve it, because if your permit to travel stays unpaid, you won't be able to travel. A copy of the permit to travel certificate QR code will also be sent to your email address. Now, boarding. What happens when you're trying to board? This is the section here. It says, prior to boarding to Nigeria, travelers must present 2 documents at their point of departure to be allowed to board. Guys, they're very, very strict with this. One of my friends came from the US and she said that they take their time to check every single document, so it's so important. First document, a negative COVID-19 test done within 48 hours of departure. Airlines have been directed to not board passengers without it, essentially. Or even if you have antigen test, they won't board you. If you have a positive result test, they won't board you. If you have a test done beyond 48 hours of your flight, they won't board you. Second, aside from the negative COVID-19 PCR test result, you need also to provide your permit to travel certificate of QR code, right, which I mentioned before. Second point, airlines that board travelers without any of the requirement documents, right, shall be sanctioned. Essentially, they're stating here how they're going to punish the airline. It states, that travelers who are non-Nigerians will be refused entry and return, basically deported. It then also states that if you're Nigerian and you hold a permanent residency, you will be allowed to enter, but you'll be subjected to the procedure outlined in D below. We'll go through that. In addition, it says this, in bold, travelers arriving with forged COVID-19 PCR results will be escorted to a designated quarantine facility, government-approved hotel, for a mandatory quarantine for a period of 7 days at the expense to the traveler, and will be prosecuted. It's interesting they bring this point, and they highlighted this point in bold because they probably know that these things happen, right? So note that you might get in a lot of trouble if you fly with a fake result. It also states that the airline will be fined $3,500 per passenger, and also airlines that consistently fail to comply with these rules will be banned from coming to Nigeria. The third point under this boarding section is that at the time of boarding, travelers may be required to undergo a temperature screen and ask about their COVID symptoms. If you have a temperature above 38 degrees centigrade or any symptoms, you won't be allowed to board the flight. So that's key to note. Now to the next section. On arrival in Nigeria, what happens? It states all travelers are required to adhere to the instructions given by the Port Health Services at the airport terminal. Travelers who fail to adhere to instructions will be sanctioned. So let's quickly go through this part. It states that all travelers arriving in Nigeria will be required to go through the Port Health screening, present their PCR test, their permit to travel certificate, and also their vaccination certificate, if applicable. They'll then have to provide their international passports for clearance. It then states for partially and unvaccinated inbound travelers, they have to proceed to the mandatory 7-day testing. I won't go through all this. I'll leave the link for you guys to check it out. You have to show up at the lab center on day 2 and day 7 for your PCR test to be done. If you're negative after 7 days, you can exit self-isolation. For fully vaccinated inbound travelers, it states that, obviously you go home, but you have to show up on the lab on day 2 of your arrival. They take your samples, your COVID test is done. Pretty much that. Note C, it states that travelers who fail to show up for their to the center for sample testing on day 2 and day 7 will be sent reminders and your details be forwarded to the NCDC to say, you're not doing good. It then states that travelers who fail to show up for testing, right, will have travel restrictions placed on their passport for at least 6 months. Essentially, they're saying that you might be banned from traveling for 6 months if you don't actually end up taking the tests, right? And it says you won't be able to travel abroad for this period. It states that non-Nigerian passport holder, wow, I think this is like a new addition here. Non-Nigerian passport holders will have their visas revoked and will be deported from the country. I didn't actually see that point in previous sort of like protocols that they'll be deported, but that's good for you to know if you're thinking about not showing up for your test. It then states that the test results will be provided within 24 hours and your state's public health NCDC will be informed about it. And also, if you have not been informed about your test result for 24 hours, definitely call up the private lab to get your result. Point D states partially vaccinated or unvaccinated persons who test negative for COVID-19 after 7 days shall end self-isolation on receipt of a negative test result, but must continue to self-monitor for the symptoms until day 14. So you just continue to self-monitor even though you've exited quarantine. Then tells you to keep wearing masks, social distance, and whatnot. It says that fully vaccinated passengers who test negative after day 2 must continue to observe non-pharmaceutical intervention measures, wearing masks, maintain social distancing, regular hand washing, using sanitizers. It's so important, guys. Like, December is coming. A lot of people are going to be coming into the country. They're going to be events. You need to protect yourself. Like, COVID-19 is real. Like, it's seriously real, guys. And literally, like, protect yourself, especially during this period whereby people might have like their guard down. Protect yourself and protect others around you too. F, travelers reporting or developing symptoms of COVID-19 in Nigeria or during screening will not be allowed to self-isolate. So if you're on arrival in Nigeria, will not be allowed to self-isolate and will be placed in institutionalized quarantine. So if you start showing symptoms upon arrival in Nigeria, they'll take you into quarantine, essentially. Point G says that persons who test positive for COVID-19 after the post-arrival day 2 and day 7 shall be managed based on the national guidelines for COVID-19 treatment. So now to the last section, right? And might be really, I hope most people don't fall into this bracket, but it states what the procedure for travelers arriving without a valid PCR result. So, right, it states that any traveler arriving in Nigeria without a valid COVID-19 PCR result, what does that mean? You have no COVID-19 PCR test result at all. You came in with a forged one, right? Or you came in with an antigen test result. Will be subjected to the following measures. This is what's going to happen to you if you fall under that category. It states if holding a foreign passport or you're not a resident in Nigeria, you'll be denied entry and you'll be returned, deported basically at the cost of the airline. Point 2, for Nigerians and foreign passport holders with residency rights, it states that Port Health will check your temperature, review your health questionnaire to establish your infectivity risk. Point B, traveler will be escorted by Port Health Services and security personnel to a designated quarantine facility, government-approved hotel, for a mandatory quarantine for a period of 7 days at the expense to the traveler. They highlight this point again. You're going to be the one paying for it. Point C, traveler's passport will be collected by relevant authorities and will not be released to him or her until after completion of the mandatory passport quarantine period. They are going to take your passport from you from the airport. And until you finish quarantine, you won't get it back. Point D, a COVID-19 PCR test will be conducted by a designated private lab within 24 hours of arrival at the quarantine facility at your expense as a traveler again. If the test is positive, you have to go to the isolation facility and manage according to national treatment guidelines. If the test is negative, the passenger will continue again with the mandatory isolation at the quarantine facility until a satisfactory day 7 PCR test is done, right? It then has a brief guideline for outbound passengers. It states all passengers traveling out of the country are required to provide evidence of full COVID-19 vaccination or a negative COVID-19 PCR test done no longer than 48 hours before departure. This is so new to me. This section about guidelines for outbound passengers, that now if you're flying out of the country, you need to either be fully vaccinated, right, or have a COVID-19 test done before 48 hours before your flight, irrespective of what your destination or your transit country requires. That is new, guys. Like, that is super new to me. Is it new to you? It feels new to me. Anyway, it ends with this, that this protocol comes into effect from 12:01 a.m. on Sunday, the 5th of December, 2021, right? So it's saying that at the early morning of Sunday, all this is going to actually come into effect. Wow, guys, like wow, wow, wow. You know what? I really hope you guys made it to the end of this video. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a comment and say, Sassy, I made it, because that last section is so important. It's super, super important. Guys, what do you think about these new protocols? Like, do you think it's fair enough, right? The way COVID decided to stay with us and not move. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching my video, for supporting me. I have, super interesting news for you coming soon, probably by next week. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for your love and support. Don't forget to give this video a huge thumbs up. Please, please, please share this video. Share this video. Tell your friends to subscribe to my channel. We're trying to get to 70K. We can make it happen. Gosh, guys, that was a long video, but thank you for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.